Dr. T. Srinivasa. So he is a professor in electronics department at the Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore. He has obtained his BSc honors from New Science College, Hyderabad, and ME and PhD from IISc. He was a postdoctoral research fellow at Toyohashi University of Technology, Japan during 1992 to 1996. His areas of research interests are optical communications and in particular photonic integrated circuits. He has published around 50 research papers in reputed journals and has also guided around 18 PhD students. He is a member of National Board of Accreditation, NBA. He was also the chairman for GATE IISc Zone during the period 2010 to 2013. He is a senior member of IEEE Photonic Society, SPIE and OSA. Sir, I deem it a pleasure to welcome you as our speaker for today's session for this FDP program. Thank you for accepting our invite, and sir, it is over to you to start with the session.
Yeah, good morning. You are able to see my slides?
Yes, sir.
I have just started sharing. Okay. Good morning. Let me, to put the protocol, I would request the organizers to interrupt me anytime. They can call me on the phone also if I'm not able to look at the chat box. And if there is any problem with the network or anything. Okay. And you, of course, the participants are welcome to post questions on the chat box, and the organizers will help me to handle them. Okay.
Yes,
So first of all, let me thank the organizers, the Oxford College of Engineering, for calling me over to your FDP. So I have seen the theme of your FDP, and the very grandiose things are there, very high objectives of making practical implementation of this biosensors, biotechnology, and so on and so forth. So my topic is on optical biosensors. As you may have observed, I am working in Indian Institute of Science. Our lab is called Applied Photonics Laboratory. Most of our work is research oriented, even though recently some of our faculty members and we have started patenting and making some of these practical. Of course, many of our researchers have become practical. So I hope my lecture will be very useful to you. So I will take about an hour or so and slightly more to present what all I feel as part of optical biosensors, including a little bit of work that we have been doing in our lab. Sometimes we did something with Debel. So I'll put some of the slides based on our work there also. And I will acknowledge the inputs and the collaboration from Debel and inputs from many of my research students who worked on these topics. So this is a brief outline of my presentation. I will talk about the optics and the relation of sensors, how optics is useful in sensors. Then I'll go on to some specific topics. One of them, the first one is called the integrated optic sensing. That means you can make sensors on the chip. So that is one of the areas of work in our lab. So I have put that. Then within that, there is a more recent topic called the ring resonator based sensors. Ring resonator is a very important device in integrated optics, and I'll put some results on ring resonator based sensors. And as you know, for biosensor application, fluidics is a very important component, and there are a few biosensors based on the optofluidic effects. Then one of our project that we did with Robert Bosch Center is called pulse pressure monitoring device, not based on the integrated optic, but based on the fiber Bragg ratings. I'll put that also. I hope a collection of these will be, even though assorted, may be interesting to you. And I hope some of you will work on these subjects and you can get practical into this. Some of them can easily be implemented, and of course a lot of effort is needed to implement because of packaging, the testing, and many other things will be there which we may not be able to discuss in this lecture. And of course I know many of you are looking at, first of all, in any of this developmental work, the research is the first part. So I hope some of you will benefit from this, and particularly if someone wants to go in for R&D and try to collaborate with some industries, I think this information will be very useful. I'll put some practical information and also some commercial information also, whatever I could get. So I will, once again, I will acknowledge all the resources that I have taken. So this is a broad chart from IEEE Circuits and Devices magazine some time ago. Just a minute, please. On transitions between the photonics, biophotonics, and nanophotonics. As you know, photonics is a science and technology of using light for many applications, ranging from optical communications, the sensors, and now the biomedical applications, and into the future, into quantum communications, and so on. These are all the various domains that photonics will play an important role. The most dramatic development, as you know, is on the optical communication. Fiber optic communication is a reality, and due to which we are now talking about the photonics. Even though photonics has been there for over a century with the different applications, now it has become more and more important and more practical. So now we are looking at bio-related applications. We can say that the subject of biophotonics is interfacing between the photonics and biology, and mainly for the applications to scientific applications on biophotonics, then biomedical applications, and so on and so forth. So this is a Venn diagram chart which shows an intersection between the photonics and biomedical science. If you look at biomedical science, you have a lot of things. Of course, I would like to just simply put a disclaimer saying that I am not a biologist. I am using only the applications of biology. So, of course, a little bit of expertise in photonics we have, but we have almost a zero knowledge on the biomedical side. And we are definitely dependent on the medical practitioners and others who are knowledgeable in this domain. Of course, definitely we can give the inputs and we can collaborate. So the subject of biophotonics can be listed in the intersection diagram. You know that it can be used for diagnostics, therapeutic applications, imaging, that is a very big subject, and more specific one being the biosensing, some specific targets and specific chemicals and elements can be sensed using photonics. The other broader area, you know, is the tissue engineering, where light can be used to manipulate the cells. This is the one of the interesting areas, of course, where a lot of biological knowledge is needed, and it's going to be an important domain. So you can say that this is an interdisciplinary subject. Biophotonics is an interdisciplinary subject between photonics and biological sciences. So this chart will show you what are the various categorizations that you observe in the area of biophotonics and biomedical imaging and so on and so forth. This is a broad categorization which has appeared in that paper on circuits and IEEE circuits and systems. So there are two broad categories. On the right hand side, you see various techniques or imaging techniques, a sort of different categories of imaging techniques. You can have OCT, optical coherence tomography, near field microscopy, diffused microscopy, Doppler tomography, and interference microscopy, and so on. And this left hand side, you see a more finer distribution of what can be called as confocal microscopy, which can be categorized into fluorescence based things, reflection based microscopy, and more recently multiphoton microscopy. And there's a conventional one in the reflectance based, pinhole based things, very simple ones, which may not be sophisticated but may be useful in a quick and very low cost sense. Then more prominently in the recent times on fiber optic based reflectance microscopy, where you can use the single mode fiber or a multi-mode fibers or bundles of fibers also have been used, and so on. These are all the various aspects. So there are several advantages of using these techniques. So you have a three-dimensional approach, you can have very sharp images, you can have sub-micro resolution images, and so on. So thicker specimens is an important problem. Thin specimens, they could easily be dealt with by using transmittance and other techniques, but thicker specimens can be made by using these techniques. So you can also reject out of focus image information, and you can filter out, and a lot of optical image and signal processing can be done. These are all the various advantages, and this is a broad categorization. So let me start with briefly the types of biosensors that we'll encounter and which are possible. So the simplest ones and most common ones and more practically and cost-effective ones are fiber optic based, you can say, because fiber optics is already well established. A lot of components, equipment are available both in the design stage, in the development stage, as well as during the usage and implementation stages. Then there are what are called planar waveguide based. When you want to go in for a chip, you can go for planar waveguide based sensors. So I'll describe a little bit later on, but quickly, a planar waveguide is a device where on a small substrate, you coat a thin layer on top of it where light can be guided. That can be called as a planar waveguide. In fact, the general word, the planar, implies that all the device that you are making in one plane, but it doesn't mean only one layer, but a few layers. Then within that, a specific case of what is called the evanescent waves. As you know, the light propagates in terms of modes of the waveguide. So there are what are called evanescent waves which spread outside the waveguide. So it is very interesting and very good and very constructive and easy to develop sensors or devices based on evanescent fields, the field which spreads outside the waveguide. We can access that by, for example, by coating another layer on top of this waveguide, you can easily tap the evanescent wave that is propagating inside the waveguide. Then when you come to implementation, simply a waveguide is not sufficient. We have to construct higher order devices like interferometers, then couplers, and so on and so forth. Interferometry is a technique where you beat one signal with another signal to get a information about one of the arms. Suppose you have two arms of an interferometer, typical interferometer. One of the arm can be the sensing medium, one of the arm can be the reference medium, and the difference between them is the one which gives you the information contained in the one of the arms. So SPR is a technique recently has become more important, surface plasmon. So this is a technique where light propagates at the interface between the dielectric and metal. Instead of having both the, as you know, in the fiber optics and integrated optics, you have different layers of dielectric materials. But here you can have a interface between a dielectric material and a metal. So certain plasmons are created, or they can be excited at surface, and you can use them for very good sensing. So SPR is a one of the good techniques, very sensitive techniques that is available today. So a very brief description of some of these techniques that I have just mentioned. You can have reflection-based techniques. There are a lot of, I have put many factors here. I'll also put some commercial devices which are developed by several groups and several companies also. So the reflection-based techniques change in the phase and amplitude of the polarized light, which provide information about the thickness, refractive index of the layers, biolayers, you can call it, whether protein or enzyme or whatever you code it as a, we can call it as an analyte. Just this is a specific type that I am trying to talk about. So the surface, reflective surface is needed. So you are trying to reflect the light from the surface of the waveguide or the chip, and then you are collecting at the other end. Okay, so these are reflection based. The interference based techniques are like soap bubble effects. As you know, you have the soap bubble. In a soap bubble, the light reflects from different interfaces and can be used to monitor the color changes in thin films. So if you have several thin films and light reflects at different interfaces, you can get very useful information about those films. Not only about the thickness, but also about the refractive index and changes in the refractive index, and all these things can be captured in the spectrum of the interfered signals. Then, as I just in the previous slide I mentioned, evanescent field is the one which spreads outside these films, and you can use them for many devices, like I mentioned. So when during the total internal reflection of light at the interface, the evanescent field is generated in the medium above the surface or above the interface. So changes in the refractive index with this evanescent field can be measured and can be used to make sensors. So these are some of the commercial optical biosensors that are available, and their different types are shown here. You can go to these websites and find more details, but I don't have much information here, except from whatever you can get from the website. Just want to put this slide to say that some of these are very practical devices and are in use. So I will like go into smaller and smaller dimensions. As you know, MEMS is a subject where you can create mechanical devices along with optical devices. So MEMS stands for micro electromechanical systems, and you can also include optical devices in this. Okay, you can say MOEMS, micro opto electromechanical systems. I would like to highlight some of the sensors where optical devices can be made. So in particular in MEMS, you have all these physical sensors. These are traditional physical sensors like pressure, accelerometer, temperature, gas sensing, chemical sensing, and so on and so forth. So these can be adapted to biosensor applications also. But what I have put as a fluidic applications where the medium which constitutes the device is not in the solid form, but it can be moving. So it is possible that you can have a fluid in between some waveguides or at the interface of waveguides, and that fluid can be the analyte which can sense the biological information. So we'll assume that in all the discussions that we'll be dealing with analyte. Analyte is the one which contains all the biological medium and information, its concentration, and all those things have to be worked out. So because I'm now talking about the optical methods of dealing with this, I have put some applications of these MEMS which involve optics. You can have a completely adaptive optic system. You can have communication across several devices on the chip. You can also use it as a laser cavity, and you can tune using these MEMS and these devices. You can also do a lot of spectroscopic techniques, spectroscopy of the waveguides, you can say. And people have been using all these things for scanners, displays, and so on and so forth. So more recently, of course, MEMS has become very important in communication applications where you can make a lot of cross connects and switches by using these MEMS. I mean, I don't want to go into technology of these MEMS in this course, which may not be fully relevant. It depends on what type of biosensor you are trying. Of course, in the simplest case, we should know how to fabricate a simple optical waveguide along with the bio element on top of that. So you can simply assume simply a substrate, silicon or whatever you like, and on top of that, a thin layer of medium for the waveguidance, and one more layer on top of it for as a bio layer. In the waveguide layer, we'll assume that we'll use lithography to delineate, to create all these structures like a branch or a coupler or ring resonator or whatever you like. So these are the various processes or elements of the fabrication. In terms of materials, as you know, silicon is one of the common material for all the chip applications, including photonics. But of course, that is not the most suitable one when it comes to bio applications and sensor applications. There are a lot of other materials that we have to deal according to the sensing material or the parameter that we want to measure. So I'll show you some small applications. So conventionally, this MEMS has been used in automobile applications. At different points in automobile, you can put sensors like the tire pressure monitoring. Then you can have the windshield, light control, then the fuel injection systems, and so on and so forth. There are some of the commercial ones or the fabricated ones or developed ones also are shown here. So because we are not talking about much about the automobile applications, I need not go deeper into this. So this is a chart, which is a hypothetical one, not fully real, which shows all the points in the human body that you can embed biosensors. Okay, sensors and biosensors and MEMS. You can see on the left-hand side, you see an IV blood pressure sensor, where you can also have a small chamber where drug also can be delivered. People are talking about drug delivery systems, where it can be embedded inside the body and the medicine can be released according to some triggers, like blood pressure going up some value or temperature going down by some value, etc. So I would just want to, I hope this picture because to show that this is going to be a practical one. It is already published and someone has made some prototypes of this. So you can observe that in a human body, there are various places in which you can put the sensors. In particular, there are some of the important ones are near the heart. For example, you can monitor heart physical parameters by using these biosensors. And you can also, of course, there are two broad categories, as I just now mentioned. One can be external, and the other one is non-invasive. I mean, which can be called as non-invasive. And it's also possible to embed these sensors inside the human body. For example, in the thigh muscles, for example. Of course, it can be both external as well as internal. You can also replace some of the muscles with these artificial devices and can monitor the bodily functioning. So just as an example, you can think of attaching a thin layer, a small chip onto the thigh, which can monitor the strain on the muscles, particularly for sports persons and so on. This can be very, very useful application. And of course, and also for rehabilitation applications. So, and there are many others like bone density monitoring, or the leg, what is it called, angular measurements, and so on and so forth. Many areas that can be done. So as you know, a lot of these applications have started with the sponsoring by the defense agencies, both even in India and also abroad. Defense are the ones which have supported all these photonics applications, and so many applications have been developed for defense applications. For example, the soldiers in the high altitude and low temperature environments will require sensors to monitor their bodily functions, then their breath, the oxygen content, not only the bodily, biomedical application. When I say, it need not be fully human body, but it can be outside, and you can measure the, for example, the oxygen content or humidity and so on. We, for the time being, I will not address those too much physical applications, but I will say the bodily applications or the biomedical applications are the topic of today's discussion. So these are all the various applications for of MEMS for the defense. So let me look at a few types of biosensors. One based on the planar waveguide. So planar waveguides are media in which light propagation is confined. You can look at this picture which I am showing. This is a 3D picture of a planar. You see, the first one, of course, you can recognize an optical fiber. It's a thin cylindrical rod with a refractive index of some value in the core and some other value in the cladding. So the thinner region where the light propagates is called the core. Outside is cladding. Typical thicknesses are of the order of a few microns. The commercial grade, the optical communication fibers are typically single mode and are of the order of a few micron, 9 micron or 10 micron. Of course, later on I'll show you that we can also have bundles of optical fiber if you want to do for biomedical applications. Then the second picture which you see is called the planar waveguide. So you see a 3D picture of the waveguide where the front layer is shaded and it is the region where the light is confined. Okay, when you launch light into this from one of the sides, the light can propagate and it can come out and it can be modified based on what is happening on the waveguide. So in the bottom one is called the channel waveguide, which is buried inside the substrate. By using lithography, you can fabricate. So this blackish region has a higher refractive index compared to shaded region, and also more than the adjacent regions. That means the channel is buried inside the layers. So while fabricating, you can make that. Nowadays it is quite easily possible. So these things can be done in India also now in the developing stages. Of course, when it comes to practice, you need a lot more packaging and other sophistication. So there are different methods to couple light to this waveguide. How do you launch light and measure the parameters is an important question. At this moment, I'm not showing you any biomedium on top of this, but you can assume that there is a biolayer on top of this which will sense the biological parameters. So there are different methods to couple light into the waveguide, and these methods can also be used in a diagnostic sense to measure also, not only to launch light into this waveguide. So there are 3 different methods that people use. One is called the prism coupling. I'll elaborate some of these techniques in the next few slides. You can use a thin film prism. You can use a prism on top of this waveguide to couple light into this. Then gratings. You can print gratings across the waveguide and they can couple light in and out. And more traditional one, more old one technique you can say is the end-fire coupling. You can take an optical fiber and by the side you can attach it to the waveguide and you can do what is called end-fire coupling. So typical parameters used in applications include, say, as you know, 400 to 700 nanometers is the optical visibility window. Okay, but communication you go up to some 1600, still higher for some of the applications. Depending on the application or depending on the material, you have the application. So plastics will have certain value of operation, glass much more, and silica is beyond infrared, and so on. So depending on the material, you have to choose the waveguide material such that your sensor is responsive to that particular wavelength of interest. So this is an example of a planar waveguide based total internal reflection sensor. It is based on fluorescence sensing, can be detected at right angles. You see, this is the chip where you put that. So this is the place where you have this is a prism, and you have a thin layer on top of that from which the light is reflected, And this is a prism interface that couples the light from input to this interface. So you can have other things like you can have filters and some other light output to compare with the reflected light. So you mainly, we are in this particular example, you can say that we are detecting the reflection angle at which is, as you know, the reflection is at a, I mean, the angle of incidence and reflection are equal, and this interface at this point you can focus and see what can happen there. So I have also shown, it may not be very completely clear, but there is some small penetration into the top layer also. But I will assume that much of the light is guided in this. This prism is being used to couple the light to this film, and some changes occur in this, and then it gets reflected back. Along with that, you get some more direct light, which can be used for comparison and filtering and all that. So this particular picture shows you some biomaterial on top of this chip. You have a substrate, you have a film. On top of it, you have some other grating like device, and on top of that, you have your biomedium. So when the light is coupled into this device, certain light can be transmitted, part of it based on the grating properties like pitch and so on. And also our interest will be on the how this biological medium interacts with the optical device. So in particular, you are looking at the fluorescence properties of this biomedium to extract the information that is transmitted or reflected from the waveguide. So next is the evanescent wave sensors, which utilize the interaction between the electromagnetic field of the light wave that extend away from the surface of the light guiding medium. I'll show you the picture in a minute. There are several techniques which are used in the evanescent waves. You can convert the frequency conversion techniques, these are called, and you can have excitation in either using fluorescence or some nonlinear effects can be used to excite this. So second harmonic generation is a technique where you will generate double the frequency or half the wavelength from the input signal. So that can be very, very small and sensitive and can contain important information about the medium properties. So evanescent wave coupling in a directional coupler, there is what is called a device called the directional coupler, where two waveguides are close together, and the evanescent coupling is very, very sensitive. The light coupling is very, very sensitive to the properties of the directional coupler. This is one of the multi-purpose devices which can be very effective in biomedical applications. Of course, you can, as I have been mentioning in a couple of slides earlier also, the spectroscopic aspects are also equally important. Not only the one of the free wavelengths that is shifted, or not only the frequency or phase of the signal, you can have the entire spectrum of the signal to estimate the parameters of the biomedium. So that is called the evanescent wave spectroscopy. We were talking about the waveguide spectroscopy earlier. This is evanescent wave spectroscopy. So the spectroscopy is a technique where you will use the entire spectrum to study the properties. So this is slightly finer details, which you can just browse through them before we go to the next one. So the evanescent field typically extends over a few nanometers into the cover layer, say 100 nanometers or 50 nanometers or so on, and is sensitive to a lot of parameters like temperature, ambient effects, and so on and so forth. So a liquid gaseous sample which can alter the cover refractive index can be put on top of that. Of course, I'm not mentioned, but there can also be interaction between the light and the medium. So the molecules of the sample can absorb to the waveguide surface, and they can absorb the light that is propagating in this. And of course, they can change the refractive index can be changed due to the absorption properties. The refractive index of the medium, the biolayer can alter and can give very useful information. So when you are applying it to sensors, you can say that some of the sensors are only used once. Some of them can be in the diagnostic sense, where you can measure several times, and it's also possible that they can be cleaned up and they can be reused, and all possibilities are there. So this is a schematic of an integrated optic biosensor. It's called silicon on insulator. This is a technology of integrated optics where you can use this. And what I'm showing here is a sensor window where you can launch light into this one from here to here. It's the sensor window where you can launch light. You have an oxide on silicon, which can be said to be buried inside. And on top of that, you have one more silicon waveguide layer. This is a waveguide layer where light can propagate. And as light propagates into this, it interacts with the light that is incident from outside or along with the biomedium that you have, and you can get a lot of information. So there are a lot of things that can be done. You can have a isolation layer so that the biomedium or the light will not pass through this. And you can also have different types of molecules that can be included into this analyte, and so on and so forth. In terms of the waveguide properties, you can use directly the waveguide measurements or the Evanston field measurements. If I put a thin layer of metal or something like that here, you can also go have SPR version of this biosensor. So some parameters I am trying to give you. We usually talk in terms of the effective refractive index of the waveguide. As you know, when the light propagates in optical waveguides, there is what is called your propagation constant. E power I beta z is the propagation factor, and beta is the one which contains the effective refractive index. And due to all these things that we have been discussing, the sensing element, the effective refractive index of the waveguide changes. That's what we have to compute. When someone wants to do research, it boils down to optical properties. So you can say that the waveguides have an outer cladding material as a biomaterial. Typically, if you are using water as the analyte into which you dissolve things, you can have 1.33 as the water refractive index, over which some plus minus delta n will be the other medium, like 1.5 is the proteins. And so if you have a few ppm, then it will change a little bit, maybe 4th decimals or 5th decimal accuracy of refractive index measurement is needed. So I'm showing you some simulated graphs from our group, where you simulate the fundamental mode propagation in rib waveguide with various parameters. You have this is only a picture where you have the mode field. Effective refractive index you see are based on silicon photonics. You have effective refractive index and so on. So you can, I mean, in the next picture it has been magnified, and you can have lot of information from that. So this is the optimization of the waveguide parameters. In the design stage, you first of all optimize various waveguide parameters with a width to be around 2 microns, height is around 2 microns, which can be, this is somewhat squarish, the waveguide is somewhat squarish, so that you can couple easily. Of course, from the fiber, if you are getting some light, it is at 9 microns. So you need to have a tapered waveguide which will reduce from 9 microns to 2 microns. But the point that I want to raise here is that they are squarish, like in an optical fiber. As you may have seen earlier, you must have noticed, we were talking about channel waveguides where the aspect ratio is not 1. So width is more than the depth in many cases. So here I am trying to point out that the slab height, which is the biolayer, is varying across different values. In the design stage and also in the operational phase, you have the slab height to be variable values, typically from 1 to 1.8 micron in this particular case. You have the variation in the refractive index. It's changing from 3.141 to 3.424, such values. So it's quite a significant range of values of N effective index that can be possible with change in the slab height. So for different slab heights, you have a comparison of the biomedical refractive index, effective index with biomaterial refractive index. So for a slab height of 1.6 micron, when you change the biomedical refractive index, you have an effective varying over small values of 3.147 to some value, 1% or so. And similarly, if the slab height is 1.8 micron, then it can be drastically different. So you can use a combination of different slab heights to achieve very good sensitivity of the sensor. So I'll now look at, these are all planar slab waveguide sensors that I have talked about. Now I'll show you a few strip waveguide biosensors. Strip waveguide in the sense, this is a cross section what you are seeing, and this is the strip that you are talking about, silicon strip. You have a substrate, you have an oxide lower cladding, over which you have one more silicon core. Typically, these are a few, say, just as an argument, this is around 200 substrate, can be quite thick, of the order of 1/4 of a millimeter, 200 microns or 250 microns. Cladding can be a few microns thickness, 2 or 3 microns thick, and silicon core, this oxide and silicon core can also be, I mean, of the order of 4 micron by 2 micron or so. So on top of this is what we are considering the biolayer. So the light can propagate in the silicon. It can also propagate in cladding region, and it can interface with the silicon substrate and get absorbed. More importantly, if you are putting the cladding overlay biolayer, then with the refractive index of the cladding, the properties of the film can change, and a lot of useful information can be obtained from this configuration. These a few simulations I would like to show you. So just as an example, the 500 micron by 250 micron is the dimension of this buried structure, and you can see, you can simulate what are the field profiles as the light propagates. If it is a straight waveguide, you know that there can be a little bit of absorption. In fact, in general, you can assume that on the chip, the loss can be very, very minimized depending on the design. So this is a simulation plot I'm trying to show you about that. Now, we have talked about the planar waveguides and also the channel waveguides and buried waveguides as devices, and most of the time I have shown you waveguides which are just straight. Light propagates straight from one end to the other, and you are trying to measure its properties. Whereas you can make many types of devices like a branching circuit and so on, but here I'm showing you what is called a ring resonator. So a ring resonator is a device where you have waveguide in the form of a ring like this. This is the top view what you are seeing, and there can be a bus waveguide to launch light into this ring and observe. So the main feature of this ring resonator is, depending on the radius of the ring, the thickness of the ring, and the gap between the ring and the bus waveguide, and the refractive index values, etc., the properties of ring can be designed. In particular, you can have what is called a resonant wavelength, which depends directly on the effective refractive index and the radius. So that is the idea behind the ring resonator. And so we are trying to measure the wavelength shifts. The resonant wavelength can change based on the properties of the ring. As an argument, if you change the radius, then of course the resonant wavelength will be different. Of course, it is not easy to change the radius of the ring after you design. But if you want to use it as a biosensor, you can say that the top layer coated on top of this ring resonator will be the biolayer, that the resonant characteristics will change depending on the biolayer refractive index. So you are trying to detect the changes in the resonant wavelength due to the biolayer. So when the medium is very uniform, so when there's a thick layer of analyte coated on top of the device, you can have what is called this homogeneous sensing. So all the entire refractive index is homogeneous. It's covered with an analyte solution that serves as top cladding. This modifies the bulk refractive index of the liquid, and it can change the refractive index mode of the guided mode. Of course, I need not overemphasize again and again that you have the modes of the optical waveguide. Each mode has got its own properties, its own influence of the refractive index, sensing sensitivity, and all those things. This is the fundamental mode of the channel waveguide, and typically 100 to 300 nanometers at the surface of the core, which is which is sufficient for biomedical interaction. So a very small amount of light is sufficient for biomedical interaction. So these are some of the parameters that we have used to simulate. There's a software called RSoft for optical devices, integrated optical devices. You can use it to simulate these biosensors. So typical strip waveguide dimensions are of the order of half a micron, thickness by, width by 1/4 micron, depth. So 0.5 micron by 0.2 micron. As you know, refractive of silicon dioxide is around 1.47, and refractive index of silicon is quite high, 3.4 or 3.5, and effective refractive index will come in between these. So there are a lot of mathematics is there for those who are interested, and there are different terms that you can use to obtain different levels of approximation and so on. So I will not go too much into details about those. So these are fundamental mode propagation with biomedical as the cladding we did. And you can change the refractive index from, say, typically from 2.0040, fourth decimal places, typically 2.009621 to 1.97768. So you have of course, here I'm showing a large range of values of effective refractive index, but the actual refractive index can be very small, of the order of the fourth decimal place. So this is the plot about the refractive index, effective refractive index of the fundamental TE mode versus bulk refractive index of the biomedical. So on the x-axis, you have the refractive index of biolayer. On the y-axis, you have the effective refractive index of the fundamental mode. So this can sometimes, many times it is called as the refractive index sensing. Even though you are not sensing your interest is to sense the biomedium, not the refractive index. Through refractive index, you can do the measurements. You can see that is almost linear. When you change the refractive index of the biolayer, there's a corresponding change in the effective refractive index for the fundamental mode. In terms when you are designing and when you are computing or simulating, definitely yes, you can have refractive index, whatever values you want, whether it's practically realizable or not. Okay. So these are some details about what we have done. So we need not worry so much. So maybe the last line you can make a note. Resonator will have a sensitivity of 8.824 nanometers per refractive index units. That's quite sensitive, you can say. So this is one of the examples we did. See, the picture is not very correct, so it got distorted due to the conversion to PDF, but I would just like to describe. So you have a silicon wafer, and below the silicon wafer, you can create a diaphragm. You can etch out a diaphragm just below the interferometer. So you have, like normal waveguides, you have a silicon layer, you have an oxide layer, you have one more layer of silicon. And nowadays, there's what is called this nitride technology has become important. You can have a silicon nitride as a thin layer in which light can propagate, which has got a higher refractive index. So all these techniques of integrated optics can be used. In this particular example, I'm trying to illustrate on the top view an interferometer, MZI, Mach-Zehnder interferometer. So MZI has got an input waveguide and a branching circuit. The input light is divided into the two parts. There are two arms of the interferometer, and they can recombine back at the other end. So if I manipulate the arms of the interferometer, then you will get this information into the output. For example, if I put some biolayer on top of that, its effective index changes, and with respect to difference effective index, there will be phase shift. It's a very easy technique to solve that problem of absorption and many other things. So now I'll show you, earlier I have shown you a pressure sensor which we made as a part of the National Program on Smart Material Systems. We have worked on this, and of course we have later on, one of the PhD students has worked on this topic. Later we were able to fabricate it using the facilities in India. So there are facilities in Chandigarh, Semiconductor Complex Chandigarh, where we fabricated this device. This is for pressure sensing type of application, and the range is not actually corresponding to the biomedical applications, but it can be retuned and redesigned for biomedical applications. The idea will still work, and as you know, laser cannot be made on silicon. Laser and photo detector and all the electronics can be on a separate chip. Only the device is what I'm showing here. So we need to etch out a small diaphragm here. So the diaphragm will be just located below the arms of the one arm of the interferometer. Only that one is affected, and the other one is not affected. And so when they beat, you get the information on this arm of the interferometer. So now we talk about another type of similar pressure sensor application, pulse pressure. You can think of pulse pressure also. You have a ring resonator. Below the ring resonator is the diaphragm. You etch out a circular diaphragm just below the ring, and as you may know, the stress is maximum at the boundary, whereas the displacement is maximum at the center, and you can make use of this effect to create very good pressure sensors, including pulse pressure sensors. So the main idea is that you measure the output wavelength shift of the resonator, which is influenced by the pressure. You can also talk about differential pressure. If there is a pressure inside and pressure external, the difference of pressure is what you can try to measure. So you have a differential pressure influencing, creating a stress, which is changing the refractive index, which once again is converted to phase change, and ultimately the wavelength shift. That's what you do. Typically, a shift of about 100 picometers per megapascal or 780 picometers per megapascal is the typical value. Range, of course, can be very large depending on many parameters. Typically, some 300 kilopascal is the typical this thing. This work is done by one of my PhD student Patnaik long ago, in the beginning days of MEMS. So now let us come back to a more common type of sensors called the FBG sensors, fiber Bragg gratings. So in one of the projects with Robert Bosch Center, we have used it for wrist pulse pressure monitoring. And of course, the project contained a lot of signal processing. I would like to mention that optics alone is not sufficient. It is a crucial thing which can provide you very useful information. But you have to use a lot of electronic techniques to process them and all those things, display, etc. So typically a fiber Bragg grating has got refractive index variations which are periodic along the propagation direction. Light is propagating from the input end to output end, and in between you create a grating. This grating is artificially created by some techniques like focusing intense light into the core and so on and so forth. That will come back in a minute. So you have the refractive index profile. You have to talk about the refractive index profile. On the x-axis, you have the core refractive index, and on the y-axis, you have the effective refractive index. So this grating has got a periodic variation like this. So what you observe is a spectral response. So this is the input spectrum. A broadband spectrum is launched into this device. If you look at the transmitted spectrum, you have a dip at a corresponding wavelength where the ring resonator is where this is resonating, and in the reflected field, if you observe, you get a very sharp peak. So many times we conclude that the reflected peak is very important. But of course, as you may see later on, or you may learn, that whole spectrum is important for us. This is a typical way in which you use the FBG for sensing applications. You have a broadband source, use a circulator to launch light into the FBG. This is a long FBG, and at the other end you cleave it such that the light reflects back into the FBG, and finally it interferes with OSS signal. There is an OSS signal which continuously checks it, and you can get a very good sensor, FBG sensor. This is how it can practically be implemented. So these are all the various peaks of that interferometer or the grating. See, as you know, the grating will have a center wavelength given by lambda b is the Bragg wavelength given by effective refractive index multiplied by the grating pitch. So by measuring, of course, as you know, grating pitch is almost fixed once you fabricate, but in effect is under our control depending on the signal. This I already mentioned about typical usage of. In the practice, I would like to mention that in the field, definitely you need a lot of electronics and display techniques and so on. But here, at a laboratory level, you can simply use an optical spectrum analyzer to measure what is the spectrum that is coming out of this. So these are all the various peaks. Strain induced in shift in the wavelength. When the strain is induced, there's a shift in the wavelength for 1,000 microns. 10,000 microns, 100 microns, etc. These plots have been generated. So you see the reflectivity varying with the wavelength. So if you can also see the effect which we discussed in the beginning. The resonance is very, very sharp. So how does it handle information is the question. So this is an answer to that, where you can have very sharp peaks and they can be well separated out from other applications and so on. These are some pictures of FBG pulses that we used for wrist pulse monitoring. Several trials have been done. I don't need to describe everything, but what we did at that time was you attach this FBG, you make a device where you will attach this FBG into that and then place it on your wrist. So it can be directly placed on the wrist. That means the cladding is interfacing with your human body. So it's very, very sensitive to this packaging. If you use a thicker cladding, something happens. If you want more sensitivity, you can do a different type of packaging, and so on and so forth. So we tried with different materials for the attaching this, including Aral light and some easily available materials, and we could observe that FBG is very, very sensitive to wrist pulse signals. So these are the other trials that we have done using diaphragms. Instead of simply putting the FBG on the body, you can put it as a part of the diaphragm, and diaphragm can be interfacing with the human body. So based on that, you create a very good sensors. These are oscilloscope pictures of the trials that we have done at different wavelengths and on different subjects and so on. If you look at some of our papers, you can see that on different subjects like children, then women, and so on and so forth, we have tried with different combinations to see that this package is sensitive to different range of people. So a lot of optimization and signal processing is involved in all these things. So I don't know whether it may be of interest to you or not, but you can do the processing of these pulses by digital techniques. So I don't need to show, I don't need to describe too much, just 1 or 2 lines on each. You can have this is the analysis of recorded signals and different experimental conditions. So you can easily see the spectrum variation. You can see that it has become very, very sharp. So this is observation of the amplitude of the signal of launch is found to be greater than the amplitude before the launch. So more frequency characteristics are found before launch signal than after the launch signal. There is the input end and there is output end. A lot of other frequency components can be experienced because of the medium is fiber is nonlinear, waveguide so can be nonlinear, and so on. So this is a chart which shows how the pulse entropy is varying. You have got subjects S1 to S10 and different signals as signal S1 and S2 values and so on. So this is a table which shows the values of various values of wrist signal values of various wrist pulse signals. So here you have rhythmicity analysis for these pulses. You can say that they are all rhythmic and different types of signals and different values of the collector and resistor voltages is what is plotted here. So I would like to conclude that part by saying that difference between the maximum and minimum elements can be done. You can express it as a percentage. If variation coefficient, what is called the variation coefficient is, you can expand it in a series. So 20% is more than the second minimum. Then the pulse signal responded to this PI series in arithmetic pulse. So whether it's rhythmic or not, you can easily, or the entire spectrum, not only the rhythmic part, entire spectrum can be modified. So we have done a lot of time domain analysis of signals after recording and before and after lunch and all those under various conditions. For those who are interested, you can go through some of our papers. So I would like to finally show you one more example of an optofluidic biosensor. One of the PhD students worked on this subject, where instead of having a dried up layer, you can have a fluidic layer. It can even propagate, it can even flow. The fluid or the analyte, what you call, can even flow between the waveguides. Suppose if you have a directional coupler with 2 waveguides separating, in between the separation, you can put the biofluidic sensor. And also you can also measure the movement of that. And also, it is also possible to measure or monitor if there is any other biochemical development within this analyte. That is a very interesting area which is not explored much. Even in our lab, we have not done that much, but we have done a little bit of optofluidics and then coupled it with optical waveguides. Okay, this is done by one of my PhD students, Dr. Narayan, who worked on the optofluidic biosensors. So this is a brief analysis Sometimes you can also use a lot of all these mathematical techniques to optimize and all those things. So you have a various optimization functions like the output or the spectrum or sensitivity, which are functions of all the design parameters like the refractive index, the thickness, values, and so on and so forth. So it has been divided into various groups. You have once again you have class of, you have the silver diffused subs. You can actually make waveguides by diffusing different impurities, and then over that you can, here in the top picture you see the waveguide, and there's a gap region where you can put your optofluidics. This output waveguide section, the light will spread inside the gap, and only a small fraction of that will be captured. And if the refractive index is more, it can be more focused, and you get a more sensitivity and all that. So this is plot showing the spot size for traveling a different gap. So that means as the light propagates, there is a spot size variation. So for different gaps, you have different spot sizes. For example, you see 100 microns, how much it is, 200 microns, 300 microns. This is a gap distance. You have two waveguides with a gap, and the spectrum is different. So you can also do the transmission studies, determination of mode spot size at field emanating from the input waveguide at various intervals. You can also measure S2 at various intervals of fluidic gap, and at the output and the mode mismatch also you can calculate. So determination of power coupling in the output waveguide is going to be crucial. If you don't get enough light at the output, then you have trouble. You have to reduce the sensor dimension, or you can use an amplifier, and so on and so forth. So a lot of sensitivity analysis can be done. Sensitivity can be, you can analyze by using rate of change of the pressure or the parameter value with change in the refractive index. So the refractive index of the biomedium is changing, and so there is a corresponding change in the power coupling into different regions. So this is a summary of some results that we have got. That mode spot size is what is measured, and then sensitivity, and then the gap in microns. Quite some of them are quite large values. Nowadays we don't need very wide gaps for operation. That will also simplify other parameters like the packaging and launching light and all that. So refractive index limits also, you can up to what values of the refractive index you can. Typically they are of the odds of 10⁻⁶. So that's all I have to show you, but I can take up questions, and there's a lot of other work that we have been doing. For example, we have in a recent thesis we have done FBG based measurement of bodily parameters. I have given some small indication, but you can, in the recent work we have used for angle measurements, for cardio measurements, and for joints. So all these things we have done using FBGs. So there are other work. I have already mentioned Malti's work on this, and then the work on ring resonators. So thank you very much for the time being, and if there are questions, I'll take. Organizers can help me to discuss.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for that elaborate, informative talk. So if participants have any questions, please you can unmute yourself and ask, or you can post it on a chat box. We will put it forth to the speaker.
Preeta ma'am, can you speak few words?
Yeah, we have some of the colleagues I saw in the participants. Dr.
Yeah.
Preeta Singh, I hope is there. She also has been working on these biosensors and the different. I have not put that particular part. They have been working on photonic crystal based biosensors, integrated optical biosensors. She can throw some light on this whenever opportunity is there in this FDP, and they have also patented a few devices.
Yes, sir, I was going through that. It was very good, sir. All possibility of biosensor you have put.
Yeah, I have focused on the principles part.
Yeah.
Not
Yes,
too much
yes.
on the technology part. Various devices have shown which are possible.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
in particular, I have focused on the top layer the add layer, or what can be called as add layer. You
Yeah.
can use it to change the properties of the optical properties of the device, and you can make sensors.
Yes, it was very huge and very vast you have given. Yes, it was very nice. Question is not there, sir, because I was going through that. I was listening very nicely. So lot of PhD topic also you have given. If anyone is interested, they can work in so many ideas, so many variety of biosensor you discussed.
Yeah, I would mention that, you see, all this material is usually discussed in EMBC, Engineering in Medicine and Biology. This is a society of IEEE. For
Yeah.
those who are interested, please have a look at that and join that.
Yeah.
There is an active branch, active society chapter in Bangalore of IEEE EMBS. For
Yes.
those who are interested, you can ask either Dr. Preeta Sharan or me. You can please join and take up activities. A lot of scope is there in that. It's a small society, and particularly those who are in the industry and those who are faculty members, it's a very useful society. I hope some of the participants are there in IEEE, so you can easily add more into your what is that called, your membership.
Yes, sir. In future we are doing, sir. Manjunath sir already.
Yeah. I have learned that
Yes.
Professor Manjunath, who is organizing this FDP, is planning to form a students branch chapter
Yes.
of IEEE EMB Society. So I know that there are many faculty and students from Oxford College in this audience. So please join and support him.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Looks like there are not many questions coming in. So we will conclude the session for today. Sir, on behalf of staff, student and HOD from Department of Biotechnology and the Oxford College of Engineering, we extend a very warm gratitude for accepting our invite and being a speaker for this session, sir. Thank you so much for being part of our FDP, sir.
Yeah, thank you very much, everyone, for listening, and also the organizers for calling me to this program.
Thank you,
Thank
sir. Sir, you may exit the meeting, sir. Thank you.